Welcome to Fire Your Hiring Habits with John Mitchell. This is the place where we dive into the world of talent acquisition, explore the challenges of today's workplace, and discover what it takes to build a thriving and successful organization.
I'm back with Risha Grant, the internationally renowned DEI expert and best-selling author of Be Better Than Your BS. Now, Risha, I want to make myself a little vulnerable to you and maybe get in a little bit of trouble. But here I am, an old white guy. I'm a CEO. I feel like when I'm talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, I'm walking on eggshells. Even though I didn't come from a place of privilege, we were a poor, divorced family. Someone may look at me and say, what is John Mitchell talking about? He's the boss. What's he complaining about? What are some of the ways I can portray my passion for what you call the cause of the people?
I think you're doing it already. I mean, just having this conversation with you, I can tell that you care. I think that what leaders can do, especially someone in your case, is listen, validate, and act. Listen to your employees, active listening about what they're dealing with, and really embracing what it is that they say to you. So when you validate it, you don't have to agree. Validation doesn't mean that I agree with you. It means that I understand this happened to you, and I'm sorry that it happened to you. And then acting on it is figuring out a way to make sure it doesn't happen anymore, and maybe talking to people. But I think it's so important that leaders are firm in when it comes to DEI. They're saying, hey, this is not going to happen at this company. I don't want that kind of company. I think sometimes leaders, especially CEOs, have a hard time when it comes to people that they've worked with, right, for a very long time that are really creating a toxic work environment. It's very difficult to say, I've got to get rid of John. I know he's been here 20 years, but for 20 years, John has been making people's lives hell, right? So it's one of those things where I think you have that conversation first. And you let that person know, like, this is not okay. We have a stack of complaints here.
But if they don't, it's time. The change needs to be that person.
Yeah. It's time to go, because you need a culture. I mean, why are we in business? We're in business to make money. We're in business to impact lives. We're not there to pay out lawsuits for discrimination charges. And as you put it, an old white guy, and you brought up privilege, which is a very tough term, for white men.
I don't think I had privilege, but yet I had opportunities that I'm sure others did not.
That's what I was about to say, is that you're able to, simply by virtue of being a white man.
My wife's a blessing, and she points it out to me all the time. She's great.
Yeah, you can make change.
Like you don't know what you're talking about. You had this. I was like, oh yeah, I guess I've never been. So Risha, you're a Black woman. I've never been a Black woman. I never knew those struggles or those biases that just happened by people walking by me.
Exactly. I had one of my friends, he's a white guy, and I wrote an article about when I first started my business, how I used to change my voice, code switch, so that I could try to get past the gatekeepers, He said, I bristle when people talk about white privilege. He said, but never in my life have I had to change my voice or even thought about changing my voice so that people will be more accepting toward me on a phone call. And I think we don't think about privilege in its totality. So yes, I am a Black woman, but I'm also a Black woman that has a degree, that lives in a beautiful home, drives a nice car, have both my parents in my life. All of these things.
All these different things, yeah.
Yeah, those are privileges. Those are privileges that I have been able to enjoy. And there are white gay men who don't have they don't have straight privilege. So privilege needs to be broken down a little bit more. I think it would be more accepting if people understood that. I have friends that are Black women who haven't gone to college, aren't doing very well. I mean, so there's some privilege there that enabled me by the sheer fact that I had parents. I would have went to college, even if I hadn't gotten a basketball scholarship. I still would have been able to go to college because my parents were in a position to help me to be able to go to college. So Yeah, so I recognize that, that privilege. So it's not just white men that have privilege. We all have different kinds of privilege.
That's a great insight. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I think it needs to be broadened so that people understand what it means in different scenarios. I do think overall the general consensus is that white men have more of a start in life, of being able to, go out and do all of these things simply because, to your point, no one's just walking past you. But I will say this, I joke with white men all the time. I will say this, since y'all fell out of style here a couple of years ago, I think maybe there is some bias. You see a white man walking at you and you cross the street now because I was like, I had so much fun with the group of white guys. I was like, y'all fell out of style here. And so now people are kind of biased against you.
Going the other way. Yeah. Oh boy. So, you mentioned one other thing that I'd like to explore just briefly before I want to talk about the embracing the Gen Z mindset. But before we get to that, you also talked about, you said, listen, validate, and act. And on your validation side, you said that doesn't mean you need to adopt those views. And I think that's an important point, that I think there's some of the fear that's out there is that people are like, well, if I'm accepting all of these different views or what have you, or experiences, or however you want to call it, I'm trying not to pigeonhole it into one area, that somehow, even though I may not endorse that, so for instance, let me use an obnoxious example. If you like, I don't know, salted caramel chocolates, and I think they're disgusting, that doesn't mean we can't work together. It doesn't mean I have to accept all of your tastes just because we work together, but I understand them. And guess what? I'll make sure there's some salted caramel chocolates that are available when we provide the dessert platter because I know that's something you like. I just won't partake of it.
Exactly. I don't know when we got to this space that if we don't agree, we can't work together, we can't be friends. I have a group of women been friends with for 40 years, and we get together as much as we can, and we argue half that time, but we plan to do it again next month, right?
And why can't we have differing opinions and respect those opinions? Because that's how you learn.
Exactly.
I mean, you sit there and say, okay, that's interesting. That's going to make me think. And I don't know how to think about it today, and that's okay. Let me sleep on that. Let's meet again another time so I can think about that and maybe change my views. Maybe not.
Well, exactly. So the win in DEI, the wins are really small. I used to look for these big wins, but to me, having a conversation with a person that has a different perspective and them saying at the end of it, I'm not sure that I 100% get it, but I see how you got there. That's the win. And same thing for me. I may not agree, but I can listen to you objectively and say, I see why that makes sense to you. And I'm going to think about it later. And I may even go and try to research some things, and I'm going to get back with you again and say, okay, this is what I learned. But at no point in time am I going to allow it to consume me in a way that that I can't talk to you. I can't be in conversation. So when I talk about validating, you have to trust people to know their own experiences. So if a person comes to you, and trust me, by the time a person of color or somebody that falls into a diverse category goes to leadership with something, they have ran it past every person that they trust and that they think can give them an objective viewpoint or a different perspective, because they're worried about going to leadership and looking like the troublemaker or the person that's causing issues. And so they've done all of that work. So when you say something like, well, are you sure that's the way it happened? Are you sure it was meant that way? Well, you're not trusting them to know their own experience. So validating it by saying, hey, that was horrible. I'm sorry that happened. Let me look into that.
Do active listening, reflect back. So what I hear you say happened was this. Did I understand that correctly? Okay, that's terrible. Let me go let me take the next step.
That's it. I mean, I think that we make DEI too difficult. I always say we learned all the stuff when we were 5 years old. You don't talk about people behind their backs. You work and play well with others. You listen when others are speaking. We learned all of this when we were 5. And we've forgotten it, and we forgot the humanity the humanity in all of us. You cannot imagine how many adults in corporations tell me people don't smile at me at work. I smile, I say hello, they won't smile, they won't speak back. And you would think people that are in their 30s and 50s and 60s wouldn't care, but they do. It makes them, especially if it's a manager, it makes them feel as if they've done something wrong. So now they're walking around and, and it has nothing to really do with them, but smiling at somebody takes 2 seconds. Asking how your day is going and all those things. Those are areas that I think managers and leadership are really failing in, are those micro inclusions, those little things that can truly change someone's day.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about embracing the Gen Z mindset. Tell me a little bit about what you mean by that, and then what does it look like in practice?
So let me be honest with you, John. I struggle with the Gen Z mindset. And this is why I had a client that's a huge client. They were having issues with their Gen Z people because they wanted sleeping pods in the office. They're like, we're not buying sleeping pods. And so I was talking to some of the Gen Z employees and they're like, well, yeah, because, we get really tired and we can just go pop in this pod on our break. And so I told this one woman, I said, okay, the sleeping pods when I was 25 was the car.
That's right. It's in your car.
If I want to spend my lunch taking a nap or my 2 15-minute breaks away from everybody, I'm going to go to the car. There's no way I'm spending thousands of dollars to put 50 pods in here to watch people sleep. So the Gen Z mindset is crazy to me from that standpoint. But when I say embracing it, they're also very courageous. Like their generation is not putting up with the stuff that our generations had to put up with. They are saying, you know what, I am not working for this company because they don't care about inclusion. Social impact is just as important to them as bottom line. They want to know, are you doing good in the world? And the other thing about the Gen Z mindset is they don't mind living at home until they're 40. They'll live in the basement, stack their dollars, and they don't have to work for that company. Whereas my mom was
you had a mortgage to pay. You had
yes.
childcare, whenever it was. Yeah.
I got out of college. My mom's like, jobs in Timbuktu. We'll see you on Thanksgiving. So the mindset is different because I remember I couldn't wait to get out the house, and I didn't have a bad, I didn't have a bad upbringing, but I couldn't wait to get out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just wanted to turn the heat and air on to the degrees I wanted it on. It was things like that. So I think that they do an amazing job of saying, this is not right. I'm not going to work here. And they are more courageous. I know my generation, we complied a lot because we knew that certain things just were not going to happen. And so we wanted to wear the right things. We wanted to speak the right way. We wanted to wear our hair the right way. We wanted to be as professional as possible because we needed to create a life, and a quality of life that meant something to us. Whereas I think that's invaluable as well. But Gen Z is coming in and saying, I'm not doing that. I will continue to live at home. I will call you out on your BS on social media. I will drag you. And so they have a level of courage that I admire. There are 5 generations in the workforce right now, and we've never had 5 generations. And for a lot of companies, ageism is as bad as racism. And so I think it's an opportunity to learn from each other. And so I try to encourage, I'm like, man, that person that's been here forever, they have institutional knowledge that it's going to take you 20 years to get, but this millennial is going to come in here and probably be able to show you something that makes your job, cuts that 3 hours down to 1 from a technology standpoint. And so if we can embrace each other, and that's all it is we're embracing each other. We don't all have to be friends. We don't all have to like each other. I mean, let's be real. Half of us don't like our families. Right. But we still keep going to Thanksgiving dinner. So how is it that we can work together in a way that moves the mission forward?
And I talk about, instead of thinking about work as a family, think of it as a team. Because what do you do? We work together as a team. I think of, I'm a big Bulls fan. So, the Jordan era, you've got a Michael Jordan, you've got a Pippen, you've got a Rodman. These guys, I don't see them hanging out together anymore. But they played fantastic ball together and they brought expertise and they worked together. So you can have a beautiful team that looks completely different, has completely different backgrounds, skills, ages, ethnicity, gender, all of that, and still be much more effective because you're bringing in the specific talent you need.
Yeah, I don't know if you watched The Last Dance. What was so interesting to me is how they didn't really get along off the court.
Yeah.
And so...
And that was okay.
Yeah, it was okay. It's like, hey, this dude's cool. I don't really want to hang with him outside of practice. But when we walk on this court, we are a united front.
That's right.
And I believe in having played, I played basketball, Kansas State, just a huge basketball fan. And sports teaches you so much about how do we win together. One person's not going to win that game, but one person can lose that game. And so
beautiful.
It's going on that court, figuring out the strategy to work together. And to your point, teams can do the same thing. I don't have to like who you spend time with after work. All I want to know is, did you come up with this part of the presentation that you were supposed to do? And let's talk about that. Now, I think I definitely think teams work better when they do have some alignment and they're friends and things like that. But there are so many instances where that doesn't happen, but we can allow people to authentically show up as who they are and do the job that they're there to do.
It doesn't have to happen. It's great if it does, but it doesn't have to.
Does not have to happen.
Yeah. So when I think about this, I think about, when we're trying to be innovative or creative, a lot of the, when you start studying innovation or creativity, they don't sit there and say, go sit in a room by yourself with no stimulus and come up with a great idea. That doesn't work. You're taking other views and other things that already exist and then imagining them in new ways or new combinations or in new industries where they exist. Was it Steve Jobs, right? He was fascinated with calligraphy and he tried to bring that into the computer, which helped drive the whole Macintosh visualization piece. So he grabbed from another industry. I look at that same type of creativity aspect when we talk about diverse groups. It gives us the opportunity to see different experiences, different ways of thinking, different fears, expectations, whatever, that will spur more innovation. That's why this is so great, because otherwise you're all doing groupthink, and who wants groupthink?
I think it's so elementary in my mind, because you're right. Just to be able to, if you come from a different background and you've lived a life that is just, it's different from everybody else at the table, you are going to think differently. You're bringing all of that with you. So I think companies really, really hurt themselves when they don't allow people to bring that with them. So most companies are looking for cultural fits instead of cultural additions. Cultural fit is, I'm going to interview this person. This person's amazing. You go tell the whole team, like, I found this amazing person. The person starts working there. They've been there three months or so. They start kind of unwinding and getting into who they are authentically. And then you start thinking, I don't know about this person. All of a sudden, I thought they were pretty cool. Well, what's wrong with them? Well, they're listening to this kind of music. I saw that they put something on their desk and they're in a same-sex relationship. And it's like, okay, so let's use those things to see how this person adds value to the team. But when you look for a cultural fit, you want them to start assimilating to everything going on in the company. But if you look for a cultural addition, you're going to say, wow, that's a pretty cool picture. Where were you? What were you doing? You're going to talk to a person, and it's about pulling people in and not pushing them out.
Yeah, cultures to me they're a living organism. They're constantly growing and adapting. If you say, oh, we've got a great culture, that implies that it's done. And it's not. You always have to, first off, if someone in leadership thinks that their culture is perfect, they haven't been talking to enough people in their organization.
Exactly. Exactly.
We always have something we can be working on. I chuckled when you said kind of music, because I love all kinds of music except for country music. I tease some of my team. I say they'll play some country music, and I'll be like, man, if I'd have known that, I'm not sure you'd made it through the interview.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And you hear it all the time. People say that the culture is the heart of the organization. But if culture is the heart, the people are the heartbeats. They're the ones that's keeping that heart pumping. And so we've got to make sure that they're healthy. Being a Gen X, I kind of fell between the millennials and the group above, right? And so when I started work, it was like, you go to work, you keep your personal problems to yourself, you do the job, and you go home. Nobody cares if you have daycare. Nobody cares if you're sick. You got 2 sick days. And so now, we're on this other side of providing childcare and making sure all these things are happening because you have to worry about the entire person, which can be hard for companies because I struggle with that sometimes, because you have people that are going to, they are going to abuse it. You have those people. And then you have the people that you have to make leave the office for the day because they are so dedicated.
Yeah, you're right. There will always be, we were having this conversation recently, just there will always be one or two that will abuse a system or try to make it too much to their advantage instead of not thinking of the larger good. And too often, I find that the reaction is we need to clamp down on everything because of these one or two bad actors. And I would rather just say, I just have to accept that there's going to be one or two bad actors out there. And they're going to try to abuse all the goodness we're trying to do. And it's going to cost me more money because of that. So fine, but let's make sure that we don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, so to speak, So I feel like I could talk all day with you, Risha. Where can people go to learn more about your DEI experience and training programs?
They can go to rishagrant.com or any of my social media handles. They're all Risha Grant. So pretty easy to find out there.
So for the listeners, hopefully you guys have all enjoyed getting to know Risha a little bit and some of her thoughts about how to improve DE&I at your organizations. This is a critical thing. And I am wholeheartedly in support of people tackling this properly. I love that, your comment earlier where I was like, we're making this harder than it needs to be.
It's about embracing the humanity in each other.
Thank you for your time today. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I look forward to engaging with you in the future.
Thanks, John. This was fun.
It sure was. And that puts a wrap on another episode of Fire Your Hiring Habits. If you've enjoyed the show, please take a moment to subscribe and receive notifications for new episodes. Also, if you could spare a minute, I would greatly appreciate it if you could leave a review to help others like yourself discover the show. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.
This has been Fire Your Hiring Habits. If you want to empower your organization to reach new heights, go to johnwmitchell.com to find the techniques and tools you need to attract and retain the best team and boldly reimagine your workplace. Fire Your Hiring Habits with John Mitchell is a production of Forbes Books.